Hey, 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 what's going on? Welcome to a very special episode of Hanging Out. And joining me today after a long hiatus is my long lost co host, Jamie. And we are doing a very special episode because, as many of you know, that there is a lot going on in our neighboring island of Maui. And we are so fortunate in that the community has really come together and and there are wonderful people and organizations that are really stepping up. And one of the organizations that we have the privilege of knowing is doing some really amazing work and very necessary work. And we wanted to have her on to talk about what their organization is doing and also, what the needs are of the community. So we have the executive director of Keiki Emalia over in Maui, and her name is Carole Zoom. Carole, welcome so much. Thank you for taking the time out of your crazy busy schedule right now to talk with us about this.
Oh, I'm so honored to be here, and thank you so much for helping us amplify the word about the needs here on Maui right now.
No, as we were talking earlier before we started recording, there's so much that is being done, and yet at the same time, there's so many of us that are feeling like what can we do? Like I feel like not enough is done, and we don't know what to do. And so,
Uh,
when you reached out to tell us about, the things that you are seeing and doing over on Maui, it really touched our hearts because, your organization specialized even before this tragedy was specializing on helping families in Maui deal with after death and someone important to them, and helping children deal with that loss. And that's something that we talked about so much as we talk about the recovery aspect of a situation. The concern is, well, what happens after? It's a long term effect, and so to know that your organization does this kind of work really was like, this is so necessary and important. And we just wanted a chance to hear more about what you're doing. And I think a lot of our listeners would be really share the same feeling as us, as that they want to help support the efforts that you're doing there on Maui as well.
Nolan, thanks. We are a small nonprofit organization, and we've been around since 2015. We work with children, teens, and their families when they're grieving from the death of someone important to them. And we were around before this disaster. We'll be around for, past the disaster, trying to figure out our way to how we can directly offer support by going to shelters, going to areas where people are congregating, churches, schools. And then we're also thinking about the long term is how do we help Maui and the culture of grief that we're going to be experiencing in a heavy way here for a long time? How do we be a part of healing that and providing the kinds of services or support to families as well as community that will help recover from this? It's
I,
going to be a generational process. This is not going to happen overnight. And it is
yeah.
beyond tragic that one of the more important areas of our Maui's culture, Lahaina, has been so hard hit by this, and we've lost so many remnants of and physical attributes that are Hawaiian. That I think there are millions of tourists who come to Maui one time, and they save their entire lifetime to get to come one time, and we're honored, lucky to be here all the time. And
Yeah.
just knowing that there's each of us can do, whether it's something small or big, to help. It feels heartening, at least, that we're coming together to make things easier for the families who have survived.
For a lot of us who are not in Maui at the moment, whether we're here in Oahu or all across the globe, what has been your, I guess, experience? And what since you're kind of on the ground level, like what have you been seeing amongst your community
Mm.
and the families at this time?
Well, the strength of the families who were affected by this disaster and their willingness to help their neighbor and each other is it's just amazing to watch that level of care for one another. And it's heartbreaking how many people and families have been affected by the disaster who have lost everything that they ever had, and have to start from ground zero. And one of the things people don't think about in terms of grief is that, the bereavement event, the death event, has a long-term ripple effect on one's life in terms of the potential for homelessness, the potential for food insecurity, the lack, if a breadwinner has died, that the lack of income for the children may mean the difference between ever going to college or not. And so it can, unless we intervene in ways that help support families in a bigger way, in addition to the aspects of medical and mental health issues that come up from the experience of someone who you love dying, it's important for us to think about all of those aspects, because it's not just, oh, it's sad that some people are sad or grieving because of these deaths. It is a destabilizing moment in one's life, and it is, grief can be a divider between communities where people will bring a casserole once and then they won't ever want to come back and check on the family 2 months later because they're too scared to talk about the death or the
Mm-hmm.
grief, not knowing what to say. And, all we can say is keep in touch and don't ask anything of the families who are recovering, and don't ask, can I get you groceries? Just go get groceries and drop them off. Are you home at 5 o'clock? I have something for you. Because people who are in grief have generally no capacity to make decisions. It's very hard to prioritize when everything is wrong. And so
Yeah.
thinking about ways that we can teach Maui to be gracious and welcoming back to the people who've survived is also part of what we have left to do.
When you mentioned that a lot of people avoid coming back after that initial contact because of the discomfort of not knowing what to say or do, I can totally relate to that
Oh, yeah.
because you're scared to also you don't want to drum up things and you just don't want to be a burden. But to hear you say that's something that we should avoid doing, and to try to be there, what can you say based on your experience and understanding of this for someone like myself or like Jamie that feels that way and wants to resist, going back? Like, what what would you want us to know that could maybe change that
Mm,
feeling in our head of like of fear or
yep.
worry that we're going to do some more damage than help?
Yeah. It's so, everyone feels this way. They're worried they're going to say the wrong thing. They're worried they're going to make
Yeah.
somebody sad. I can assure you, after the death of a family member, you're going to be sad. The person you're talking to is going to be sad. And there's nothing you can do to either make it better or worse. Being there to listen, just being there to hear if there's anything they want to talk about, or if they don't want to talk, just sitting with and having a cup of tea or looking out at the water, whatever it is the best way for us to stay connected to our people. You don't have to resolve anything. You don't have to make somebody happy. I think we all think we should try to make people happy or laugh
Yeah.
after a loss, and not expected. I think the one of the things you can actually make a difference in is by holding space with someone who either may want to talk or may not want to talk, but just needs company. Because it's that disconnection that happens from our community in grieving. And when people don't know what to say and they avoid us, that isolates us even further in a time when we just really need connection. So inviting someone to take a walk, inviting someone to help them clean up their house, just to be with them and do that for them or while with them while they're doing it, gardening, um, going, with them to go shopping to get some items that they didn't have. Just some company might be nice along the way.
That's so helpful because I think a lot of the times we think um, of supporting in ways like, oh, let me cheer them up and let me tell jokes or something, or let me give money or things. But what the way you're describing is you're creating moments and just that having that connection, human connection. And something else that you spoke to is like if they're feeling sad, like I think we have this misconception that negative emotions shouldn't be felt. Like let's try to avoid them. But I think that's part of what makes us human, and sometimes what's also necessary for healing. And somebody just had told us this quote about like grieving or grief is a sign of love. Like you wouldn't
Yes.
have loved
Mm,
someone if you don't grieve them, right? So um, to kind of reimagine how we approach loss
yeah.
is so powerful. And uh, thank you for sharing
Mhm.
those little tidbits, because I think that's so helpful for us
Mhm.
in our society that we've kind of
Yep.
don't know how to operate right when it comes to
Right.
grief.
Well, and then the other thing is that kids, especially little kids, are very concrete, and they also don't necessarily appreciate the weight of death. When you tell a 2 or 3 year old that someone has died, it's important to say the word died instead of lost, or we've lost your dad, or we've lost your mom, because kids are very concrete. They'll go looking for their family member.
Mm,
And kids' grief manifests itself depending on age in different ways, which includes stomach aches. They don't know how they're feeling, or outbursts of anger, or they can be playing and talking about the disaster, and then 1 second, and then outside running around in the sprinkler the other second. And it's just there's not always a connection between the way an adult would logically proceed through their grief as it is with children. And so we uh, train facilitators to be able to sit with children and work toward them talking about their emotions and their grief. We're not doing counseling. We're just having kids talk to each other about their losses, and see if they can, through their own wisdom, guide themselves, because we believe that everyone can heal with the right support and intervention. And so helping create a space where kids can talk to one another is what NKOE Emalia does. And then we're also expanding that and working toward doing that with families in these situations where we're visiting in shelters and trying to create a place where, through an art activity, some issues that they're struggling with may come up.
wow. So, as far as what's happening now on Maui, and what you're seeing in the communities, um, are there things that you could share with us that you would want us to know? Because I think a lot of us on the outside are seeing, through social media, different things, and it's hard to sometimes sift through a lot of the noise. What are some things that you would want the community to know or understand to kind of grasp what you're
Mm.
dealing with there right now?
Yeah, wow. I think the enormity of this disaster and the many ways in which it has affected and will affect families is hard to understand. Like Katrina or a hurricane or something like that, maybe akin to that, where there are so many people in one community affected, it's hard to hold strength for, we often, when a death is unique, we can rally ourselves to support that person. But there are so many people here grieving right now that it's hard to
Yeah.
fathom. Um, Today is the first day when the evacuee children are going to their new placements in schools, and so kids that are from Lahaina are going over to Haiku Elementary, or going down to Maui Waena, all over the island, and um, I, some of those kids are coming to school with not a single pencil, with not a dime to their name, no, and so schools are rallying, and social service agencies are rallying to get them support. Yesterday, Nakikio Emilia was able to donate 40 backpacks to Maui Waena School, where they're going to have 16, I think, kids coming in who are evacuees who didn't have anything. And then the behavioral health specialist there is distributing those to other schools who have evacuees as well. And so, we at our office are stockpiling essentials as well as toys and art supplies, so that the kids who don't have anything can have something when they go back to school. But if you can imagine, an entire population has been moved out of an area of Maui and is now sort of circulating in new areas and new towns. And so we're all feeling the grief and the impact from this, not as acutely as the families who've gone through it, but it's having ripple effect everywhere. And some of the shelters have virtually no kids, or they have kids who are vacationing here and need to get off island. And then some shelters are inundated. And so it varies a lot.
Geographically, how does can you explain like how what you just described as how many different communities are impacted? I mean, is it that Lahaina that was impacted is that these families have to go to different parts of the island, or
Mhm.
is there something that maybe could give someone who isn't familiar with Maui how they can better understand what's
Sure.
going on?
I'm trying to think. We have a family that we're working with whose apartment in Lahaina burned to the ground, and it's a family that was grieving before this event, and then also is now grieving the loss of their residence and all their possessions. And that family is now moved from Lahaina to the south side of Maui, which is a good 45-minute drive, and being separated from all their neighbors and other family members that were near them because that's where they could find shelter. And so I live up in Haiku, which is upcountry, and there was a fire here, and several residences were burned to the ground. And so their kids from there are probably going to the school they went to because it's not as large a disaster, but they're also going in a different position than they had been. And our office is in Wailuku, and Wailuku is probably an hour from Lahaina, and their kids going over there to go to school. So it depends on if you had a network of friends and family that were going to help you relocate. If you were relocated into a shelter, the Maui High Shelter, which was active until weekend, had to be converted back to a school. And so now in the gymnasium, the families from there have gone to the South Shore to Kihei. And so, we're getting a big mix. It's like a popcorn, uh, machine that is just popping people out all over the place. And it depends on your connections and then where you landed in what shelter, where you end up, ultimately.
And I know a lot has been talked about, like looking for support from whether it's government agencies or communities that are bringing supplies and such, that and there's kind of mixed messages of what's being experienced over there.
Mm.
From your perspective, can you share a little bit about what you're seeing?
Mm. Well, we had one of our outreach workers yesterday go into shelters to find connections with families with children, and we're working with other organizations that work with early childhood, so that if we encounter one of their kids who isn't one of our kids, that we can make sure that they receive support. So a lot of nonprofits are working together. And there are some bureaucratic snafus that are keeping people from feeling like they can make a difference in the shelters, and that's unfortunate. There are many ways that we can all work together to give, and so we've been trying to find our point of entry longer term. Where could we host activities that people who are still living on the other side or who have transferred elsewhere, how we can get them transportation to get together, to do activities, that kind of thing. We had heard things like there's plenty of clothing now. I can't verify that. I haven't heard that from a family in need. We've been helping people get possessions back, so they're ready to start school. But we've heard water and food is adequate in on the other side because of all the relief efforts that are going on. But then there's some of these longer term about the trauma and shock that children are experiencing, how that's acting out in the shelters and in their families, that we want to be more attuned to. And I'll defer to other of the Red Cross workers and FEMA about whether there really is enough food, for everybody, because that's not my area. What we're doing this weekend is that we're offering a grief relief for children. It's an event at the Cameron Center in Wailuku, where we're going to have activities for children that are not grief related, but just to help them create a connection with one another. And with some resources, we're giving away gift bags that have essentials and art supplies, and I believe it's the Maui Pops is going to be offering a petting zoo, of orchestra, instrument
Oh,
petting zoo, so kids can try things out,
wow.
and just lots of creativity. A chef is going to be offering meals, because I think that's one of the unthought of things, is that how difficult it is to find food when everything else
Yeah.
is not going well, and so we want to make sure of that. And if folks can get, if they want to offer something at that event, it's Sunday from 2 to 6. And and there, I think there's just going to be a lot of need coming from a variety of places across the island, and it's heartening to see the number of people who are, working toward bring resources that they've never, we've never had to have this concentration all at once, and so it's been really
Yeah.
heartening to see how hard people are working to make Maui strong, and that's amazing.
What's that the Sunday event sounds really wonderful. What's the intention behind doing something like that? Because I think it sounds like this people can get a good idea of other ways to bring relief on an emotional level and on a human level. And so I really want to hear a little bit more about, how the intention behind this and how this idea came about for you
Sure.
to hold this type of event.
Sure. Well, we were having this event as an open house as part of the Cameron Center's 50th anniversary, which is happening tomorrow. But that event was canceled in order to create space for other organizations that are doing relief work. And so we decided that because the kids have been out of school and separated from one another, it might be nice to have an event that would bring them together, get them some moments of fun, give them a place where they can talk to people who are trained, and in some ways just let the community know that what we're here for is this tough issue of grief. And if they don't know how to talk about what's happening to their children, we can give them some pointers. We have materials about how to support children through their grief. We've done workshops with schools on what to expect and how to help kids through their education, because that can get derailed by grief. And so we continue to do that, and we want other organizations to know that we're here to help them as well. And I think it's just going to be fun. There's been a lot of heaviness around this, and so we have a screen for the littles and some activities, screen for young, older teens. We've got some headphones to pass out to teenagers, because all we know is that staying connected by electronics is the most important thing in life, and then while the kids are doing those other activities, we can talk to their parents about other ways that we can intervene and give them grief resources. And other agencies, like our organization, doesn't do counseling, but there are many counselors who've come together to create a trauma-informed response to this disaster. And so helping refer people out. And then if we find out people are reticent to talk about the reality that they can't pay their electricity bill, or their spouse died and that was the person on the lease, and they don't have access to the lease, or they're going to be kicked out, all of those things we could try to work on. So we hope to create a homey atmosphere where people could let their guard down and let us know how we can be more helpful, so we can engage other organizations that do that work as well.
That's so
And a
powerful
bouncy
because
house. I mean, who can resist a bouncy house, right?
that you're speaking to my heart, because I've told her my fantasy is for my 50th birthday,
Yeah.
I want to have bouncy castles and as a 50-year-old bouncing around and she's like, well, what about the kids? I was like, no, we're not inviting kids. It's just for me and my adult friends to jump around in.
I love it. I love it. Wow. I can see even a ball pit behind you where we could fill up. Well, 50 must be a long time away for you.
Oh no,
No.
it's creeping up pretty quickly, so got to get my plans in line.
Uh,
I have a question about you just mentioned the trauma informed response, and I think that that's something that we hear a lot from educators, but parents might not be aware of what it means to be trauma informed and why it's important right now for all of the kids.
mm.
And I was just wondering if you could talk more about that for what the general public might need to know?
Sure. I'm not an expert on trauma-informed care, but one of the things I know is in American culture and also in Hawaiian culture, people hesitate to talk about death, and they also use euphemisms to talk about it. And so, in knowing that this trauma that people have experienced may re-trigger or cascade effect from another trauma that they've experienced that's untreated or hasn't been unaddressed. And it's important to be non-judgmental in the way that you're working with someone, and try to be supportive of the many different ways that people react when they're experiencing stress and trauma. The behavioral outbursts that you may see in children or teens is a completely natural response. And to label a kid a troublemaker when in reality they're trying to express trauma, it's important for educators and other people that encounter, and even family members, to know more about what these responses look like. And so I expect that, and we're lucky to have some great practitioners on Maui, but I expect we'll see more and more what would you say, common everyday tips to families about how to deal with some issues that, and I know that after COVID, there were a number of kids who didn't ever want to go back to school because it was such a traumatic experience. And so how do we guide the kids that have been through this tragedy? How do we guide and support them to re-enter the world and feel supported and not be shy about talking about their needs? And it's kind of a tension between, you don't want to open up a can of worms that somebody is not prepared when there's no one there to help you. But at the same time, mostly kids and teenagers want to feel like there's space for them to be heard. One of the things we do with some simple activities when kids are ready is to talk about the person that died and to talk about memories that they have. And the goal being to reintegrate your life with the reality that that person has died and they're not coming back. And also that your life can go on and you can thrive, and not just survive, but thrive after the death of somebody who's important to you.
I think it would be good because I know we're coming up on time, but if we could learn about what you folks are doing short term, and then what you see for your long term, I guess what your services are, but also your needs.
Sure. Thank you so much. Keiki Emalia is currently going out into shelters and working with schools and other community gathering spots to offer grief support for children. We are gathering in our office materials that people might need and bringing those out to the shelters. And then when families contact us, we've created a fund for direct aid to those families. So 100% of that aid goes out directly to the families who were affected. We're also thinking about the long term. We had already started in January of this year working with Lahaina in a more intense way, because our current project is to create grief support teams that are made up of local volunteers and people who care about kids in 5 local areas of Maui that haven't been served in the past by grief support. Nakikio Emalia is the only grief support organization on Maui that serves children besides hospice, which works with their parents. And so we're a very small organization with a big job, given that there's estimated to be about 2,200 kids by the time of they're 18 who will have experienced the death of a parent or a sibling. So we're talking about a very large population already. And then of the 100 people who have been found dead, then all of their families are now affected by grief in a more direct way. So we're looking for volunteers, particularly from Lahaina or the areas around it, to help us mount a grief support team. We'll train people on how to manage and do peer support groups, and also to be there as a listening and caring ear. And then in the longer term, looking at ways that Maui can be more grief responsive in terms of policies and public health issues that come up, because it's not just that you lose somebody and you're sad, it causes major disruption to family life. And how could we as a community be better supportive of the families that are going through that change in their lives? We have, I can send you, I did send you by email. We have a fund for long term work with Maui and all of Maui County, and in particular the long term work that's going to happen in the Lahaina area. And that's our NKOE maui.org/donate. And then we also have a fund for families in crisis. So families that have been directly affected by these wildfires, we're gathering cash and other donated items to get them back on their feet as they resettle wherever it is going to be long term. And also doing outreach into schools, shelters, all of that is, and we're adapting daily. There's somebody talking about starting a camp. And so we were, offering, you may not be thinking about how this impacts kids in terms of their behavior, but can we be there to help? That kind of thing. And so everybody's coming up with new ideas every day, and we're trying to be there to receive and also offer what we have to share. And we're doing a grief support training in September, mid-September, that will help people who want to become more involved in this area and have much more in-depth skills.
Oh, great.
Does that answer?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
I feel like I mean a lot of this was in place, as you mentioned, prior to the tragedies of the fire. Um, do you feel that because of the fire, it's almost put a rocket pack to this, the
Yep.
mission and the plans and the intentions for you?
Absolutely. I mean, for us, this is a challenge. The wildfire focuses attention on grief in a way that other people might not have thought about it or would have heard about it and dismissed it. The enormity of the situation, it's imperative for people to come together and help grieving children right now. And so I think people are feeling that. And I'm certainly feeling that in how do we better mobilize the resources that we have and how do we gather more resources for the long-term effort that this is going to take. We've been so
Mhm.
impressed with the people we've met from Lahaina and their strength in recovering from this. And we want to lend support and not dictate what that support looks like. And so we're welcoming people who have ideas to come our way to help us figure out what would be the most appropriate response.
Well, I gotta imagine too that the other thing to consider with the value and the necessity of the help that you're providing is that for a lot of parents who are have have children who are dealing with grief, the parents themselves are dealing with grief. And so how much harder is
Mm,
it for a parent who themselves is trying to deal with that grief, able to support their children at the same time? Like I can't even imagine
mm.
the
When,
difficulty of that.
Oh, it's so true. And in some cultures, talking about grief and talking about the person who's dead is not considered okay. What we try to do is normalize those conversations when it's possible. We do groups where the kids are in group and the parents are in another room, and they learn about what we're doing with their kids so that they can follow up on it at home after the fact,
Mm,
and also maybe add to their skill set in terms of what they're willing to do. But we've been uh, there's the work with the kids and then there's work with families. And I think right now is this incident has created a need for more family centered work and trying to help
yeah.
empower the parents to better handle the situation they find themselves in. The excess of emotions, tummy aches and irritation and some of those kind of things that parents are always trying hard to manage. I mean, I think we need to give parents more space and more resources to deal because they're not only feeling it, they're also watching how it's impacting their children.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just from our experience as parents, like we're constantly like feeling less than and ill equipped. And it's like people are like, "Oh, you guys are, you've been parents for X amount of years." It's like we have no idea what we're doing. I don't understand my kid. Like, why do they do this? Am I gonna ruin them for life by saying this way? Like, so to have resources and
Yeah.
have somebody who has a better understanding, I
Yeah.
can't imagine how much more helpful and powerful that is.
Mm,
uh, and empowering for parents too, like just
mhm.
to know, okay, there's science behind this, that by doing this I'm helping, rather than I hope I'm not scarring them for life by doing this, right?
Yeah, yeah.
We're
We hope.
always saying that to each other, like,
Yeah. Well, and I hope we're taking the edge off for some parents who go through our work. That it's a lot about allowing kids to talk about how they're feeling and not reacting to it, and creating
mm,
spaces in your family life, like with a place at the table where a person who would have been there who has died, and writing notes, messages, memories, and bringing that up on a regular basis. We encourage families, whether it be a traumatic death or a suicide or your average person who's elderly dies in their sleep, to talk about the person, rather, and that doesn't work in every culture, but to encourage people to create space for their children to add their memories, their happy memories, their sadness, to what goes on every day, rather than us compartmentalizing it in a way where there's no hope that it's going to be part of the family life. To recover from the death of somebody, you have to find a way to incorporate the person's memories and the lessons into your everyday life. And you're not going to lose them just because they are not physically on this earth anymore. And so teaching kids how to do that is part of a parent's role. And it's hard. It's hard for all of us.
yeah. And with the situation now in Maui, it's not only the grief of losing a loved one, it's also the grief of losing life as you know it. And the complexity of this being a once in a lifetime type of incident, that one, you could not have expected, but two, now to deal with it, like we aren't trained to
No,
understand. So to know that the work and the efforts that you're putting into this is so important, and that's why we're so grateful that your organization and your team are doing this work, because
mm.
it's going to be so essential to the recovery for an entire
Yeah.
community.
Absolutely true. Thank you for giving us voice to what we're working on and inviting other people to be a part of this effort. We have a volunteer page on our website where people, depending on what their skills are, can offer what they offer. We have people who do face painting and balloon making and those kind of
Oh,
things that
wow.
will be a part of this weekend's event, and also just an effort to. And there are people who are good at press releases, which I'm not good at, and they're people who want to support us by donating, and that's great too. And people who want to be on the ground with us when we go out to, hand out teddy bears to kids in shelters. So there's the whole gamut, you know.
I'm so glad that you expressed some of those different ways that people can support, because I think for a lot of us, we were talking about this before. It's like we want to help, but we don't really know. Like, we know we have certain skills, but how can we be a part of the solution? And then you just saying that, it's like bringing up little light bulbs. Like, you're right. That would make sense that you could use that support, and this person could, has
Yeah.
that type of skill or talent or resource. So, yeah, I'm glad that you are open to accepting assistance of all different kinds of ways.
Oh, yeah, you wouldn't believe, I've been reaching out to friends of mine who went to fields and schools that I don't even understand, finance and economics and whatever. And I'm like, I want to position the organization for the long term. And I have friends
Yeah.
who want to be supportive, and they don't live on Maui, but they've come and enjoyed our paradise. And this is the time for people who have enjoyed the island that they consider to be paradise to step up to help the kids that are affected and suffering from the experience of from the tragedy that's just happened. Rather than holding in your heart Maui that you loved and went to once, think about yourself as a partner to us. If you do,
Yeah.
if you can send out our plea to people in your local area in Boston or Colorado or Alaska, we're going to get the word out, and there's somebody connected here who can help. So, I'm not turning any help away at this point, I tell you.
Well, I know one of our dear listeners, Dr. Pat, she's listening in from Boston. So, Dr. Pat, that's a direct call to you. We need your help. But, Carole, how can people listening find a way to connect with you to help and volunteer, donate, and all that good stuff, what's the best way to stay connected with you and your
Awesome.
organization?
I don't know if you do this fancy stuff where you put our website on your blog, but it's
Yes, we will.
so not Keiki Emalia, which is a difficult name to say, but we abbreviate it NKOE Maui.org. And on the front page is both fire disaster resources for family and resources for grief in terms of helping your family through this experience. Also, what we're offering in terms of groups and out in the community, what we can offer, and then also donations for the long term, and then for us to do this work on an ongoing basis, and then another fund that will go directly to the survivors of this disaster to rebuild their lives. And I'm easy to find online because my name is unusual. And I do shout out that I guess our organization was founded because of the death of a woman who was so important to this community, a teacher at Seabury Hall. She was with the Hawaiian Canoe Club. Emalia Brown Guard was a force of nature who loved kids and loved everyone and loved being, here in Hawaii. And so our organization, her birthday in June, we delivered 45 care packages to recently bereaved families in her honor. And we do honor her every day in our work. And she, when she died, left a small child and a husband who were grieving. And so our program was started by her mother, Brooke Brown, who recently wrote a book about Emalia and her experience with cancer. And so we are lucky to be the legacy that's going to have a long-term impact on the island for children like hers who wouldn't have had support or grief care after the death. So we have a special legacy that relates to
Yeah.
Maui, and we take it very seriously.
Oh man, that's so special, and I feel like we need to have you on again,
Yes.
because there's so much more. I would love to learn more about, her and the legacy and how the organization, started and such. But right now, I know we got a lot of work to do currently. Um, and before we let you go, this Sunday, what
Yes,
are the details on either how families can attend or how people can support your efforts in putting
great.
on this event?
Thank you so much for reminding me. So, Keiki Grief Relief is happening on Sunday at the Cameron Center, which is in Wailuku. And we're in room 10, and the auditorium and conference rooms will be available for kids to enjoy activities together. And we're in our office going to be setting out grief resources. We're also going to have some food from some local chefs and some other activities, a bouncy house, some movies. If you want more information, it'll be on our website at nkoemaui.org. You can also reach out to us at contact@nkoemaui.org, or call our office at 808 214-9832 to get connected. On our social media page, Nakekio Emalia will have also the information. It's a free event. It's for families. We welcome everybody, and we have resources to pass out if people need them as well.
And what time will this event be going on?
Thank you. The event, the Grief Relief for Keiki, is happening from 2 to 6 on Sunday, August 20th. And if there is a hurricane coming or a tropical storm is supposed to be landing here on
Oh
Sunday,
my gosh.
we think it is not going to hit directly, and so we'll reschedule if it is dangerous, and we'll put the word out on social media. But I think it's a chance for families and people in the community to come together, and it's slightly a distraction and also a way to offer some joy and goodies and treats to families and grief resources for those who reach out and need that as well.
And I imagine that you gladly will accept even more, support and donations from other organizations that might want to provide,
Oh,
goods or services as
absolutely.
well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. If there's somebody that wants to provide something at this event, we have space. So thank you for reminding me of that.
Awesome.
We've been really lucky, and we have a great team of folks that have come together to make this happen. And so it will not be the last event. It's just the beginning of many events that will have to support children and families.
That's that's really great to hear that you're going to continue to do more. And please give our love to all of your team, and let them know how much we appreciate all of the efforts. And thank you so much for all the work that you're doing, not only right now, but for the last several years in what you've been doing for families in Maui and for children. And I'm really encouraged to know that, having people and organizations like yourself supporting Maui, that there's hope, there's a plan, there's a path to healing.
Yeah.
And thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's really heartening to hear that people care right now. There's people that can't reach us, whether they offer a donation or just a pat on the back. It's very helpful because this is going to be a long term. It's a marathon, not a sprint, right? Well, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us. We'll be in touch soon.